Hello everyone, welcome back to Govt Drish, and today is Lucent series General Knowledge Part 42, and we have commenced our world history and we have already covered one video with it. So let's get started today, and we'll be learning about from the Qin dynasty. Okay. So around 3rd century BC, that was the Qin dynasty was prevalent at that time, and it became important also. So what that dynasty had to do is they had kept out all the invaders that were from the north, and they had began a construction of a wall that was known as the Great Wall. Present day it's known as the Great Wall of China. After that, the Han dynasty followed the Qin dynasty, and it was during 202 BC. And the Han emperors, they had ruled China for almost 400 years. So you can say that the time period of the Han dynasty was 400 years. नाउ इसके बाद क्या हुआ, तब बहुत सारे पॉलिटिकल प्रैक्टिसेस जैसे कि हान रूलर्स के थे वो इन्फ्लुएंस हो गए, क्योंकि द टीचिंग ऑफ कॉन्फ्यूशियस हैड कम इनटू एग्जिस्टेंस. एंड देन okay, so as it was influenced by the teachings of Confucius, then during the Han's rule, like the Han's dynasty rule, when the people they want to qualify for appointments or go through an electorate system of examination before they were chosen. So this was the system, or you can say the qualification for appointment. Now those who went through that electorate system of examination, they were known as scholar officials, and they had another name that was mandarins. Now, as we know that the Chinese was the first civilization in history, and they had the system of selecting public officials through exams, this electorate system of examinations. And this dynasty was the one who selected on the basis of education and competitive examination. Now, under this Hans, there was one more principle, important, that was silk. Silk was a principal item of export during this time, and there were many, important roads that were built across the Great Wall, and it was all about carrying the trade to the west, as there were expansion of trade during that time. Now, the other two major religions of ancient China was Taoism, and this Taoism was also based on the teaching of Lao Tzu. And then we have Confucianism. It was also based on the teachings of Confucius, and we have discussed about Confucius earlier, but let me tell you, this Confucius was a temporary, or you can say contemporary, of Mahavira and Buddha. Buddhism was brought into China by Indians during the Han rule. As we know, during the Ashoka's rule, he had sent his heirs for the preaching or teachings of Buddhism. The Great Wall is one of the monuments that was all about the mighty skill of ancient China, and it was built of stone and earth, and its height was around 6 meters and extending over 2,400 kilometers. So these are the minute details which you need to keep in mind. I have already marked them, and you can expect questions out of it. Now, this Chinese script. Now let's know about the literary part. It was standardized by the Qin ruler that had ruled for many years, and even its script, the Chinese script, was spread around almost other countries as well, and the countries that were included were Japanese, Korean, and Vietnamese scripts as well. Now, what happened in the 1st century AD? Paper was invented in China for the first time, and what happened was that this invention of paper, this had a very important role, like it had a greater significance in spreading knowledge within the outside China, as through papers the printing press started. People had now started acknowledging themselves through the papers, and it was one of the greatest contribution of China to the world. Now let's know about some of the historical works in the world of China. That is, they had their own history, and the pattern of this histories was set by Suma Chen, and it was commonly remembered as the Herodotus of China. Now the water clock, abacus, umbrella, these all were invented by Chinese. Now what happened in the 2nd century, Chinese had invented a seismograph. Now, the Iranian civilization. Now, what happened in the Iranian civilization was that in the middle of the 6th century BC, there was a popular empire that was Achaemenid, and it had arisen from Iran, Persia, and the founder of this empire was Cyrus, and its capital was at Pasargate. Now he was succeeded by Darius I, and this time period was 522 BC to 486 BC. So remember this time periods. This is very important. Okay. Now it was succeeded by Darius, but it had reached its greatest extent, and it had the ability to cover entire Iran, Mesopotamia, Syria, Egypt, Asia Minor, and northwestern India during his rule only. And he had also built a new capital that was as Persepolis. So these minute details are also important as it can come in the form of MCQs. Now, Darius I and his successors were involved in many wars, and it was with the Greek states only. And sometimes they were also defeated by the Greeks, but Alexander had dealt the empire a final blow. Like when the reign of Darius III was there, Alexander gave the empire a blow, like they had defeated them very badly. Now, in the 3rd century AD, there was another powerful empire that was the Sassanid Empire, which we have learned a lot of times in ancient history as well. Now, this empire had arisen in Iran, and it was founded by Ardashir, and the time was 226 AD. And it was just in the middle of the 7th century AD as well. So, when the Arabs has emerged as a strong power after the rise of Islam, they had the ability to conquer Iran. That was in 651 AD. Now, these Achaemenids, what they did, they had introduced the use of money, the exchange system, you can say. So, the coins of gold and silver, these were used on a large scale. Like just the use of this form of exchange had been prevalent during their reign. Now, Iran in ancient times, also we can say that it was a house, or you can say a supplier of famous sailors and explorers, and among them was Skylax. What he did, he had undertook a voyage that was from the mouth of Indus to the Egypt on order of Darius. Darius had given him the order to go for a voyage. Now, what was the main religion of the ancient Iranian? This is very important because with this religion lies the history of Iranians and all the present situation also, as the practice of religion in their ancient time was Zoroastrianism, which we have quite a times listened about, but it's not so much prevalent like other religions. So, and it was founded by Zarathustra or Zoroaster, and the time period was 628 BC to 521 BC. So, this time period is also important, the foundation of Zoroastrianism. And these were the names that were called by the Greeks in the 7th century BC. Now, what about the teachings of Zarathustra? Like, what was the religion about? And these teachings are written or recorded in the book called Zend Avesta, and it is the holy book of Parsis. This is very important, Zend Avesta. Now, what was their belief? Their belief was that there consists of two forces. One is good and one is evil. Now, the god that is Ahura Mazda, according to their reference, it represents the forces of good, and Ahirman, it represents the forces of evil. Now, the sun and the fire, when they came to be worshipped as visible symbols of Ahura Mazda, it conjointly represents light. So, Judaism and Christianity is indebted to Zoroastrianism. It can be seen in other words as well. Now, what happened during the Achaemenid Empire? The official language was Aramaic. Now, the Sassanids, they had revived all the old Persian, and now they had made it the official language of their empire. And there was a new script that came into relevance, that was Alawi, and it had also developed. Okay, so now the best known, you can say that the literature of Iran was the Zend Avesta, which we have already learned about, and it is very important as it is the holy book of Parsis, and it also contains the work of Zarathustra. Now let's know about the Greek civilization. The early Greeks that were like the Aryans in India, they used to live in tribes, and they all had a leader. Like they used to form a group of families and they had a leader, and all the groups combined made a king. And their main occupations were agriculture and herding. They were a primitive type of empire, you can say. So they also had many gods like they whom they worshipped. And if we have a contrast with the Zoroastrianism, they worshipped sun as well as light. And in this Greek civilization as well, they imagine the god to be like human beings, and that's what is the difference. Because according to the Greeks, the form of god is more powerful and immortal, and Zeus was the god of the sky and hence caused thunder. So Poseidon, he was the god of the sea and raised storms that sank ships. This was their belief. They also had a sun god, was the sun god, and there was a saying that it could reveal the future. Then they had Athena, who was the goddesses of victory and patroness of the arts. They also had another god named Dionysus, who was the god of wine, and there were many others. There was innumerable gods at that time. So even there was a thought among them that their god used to live in Mount Olympus. Now, what happened around the 800 BC? There were groups of Greek villages that began joining into larger units to form city states. And at the highest point in a city state, there was an acropolis, or you can say a citadel, and it was actually built for defense and cities spread out around the acropolis. Now, what those cities were? There were Sparta, Athens, Macedonia, Corinth, Thebes, and others. And the Sparta and Athens, they were the most important city states. Now, the Spartans, what were their main concern? That was militarism and war. And it was so much, concerning that the word Spartan still is often used to mean materialistic. And another meaning of Spartans were fine soldier, but they didn't contribute much to the Greek culture. So this was all for the Greek culture for now. In our next video, I will be continuing with the Greek civilization, knowing its literary purposes and many more. So till then, stay tuned and watch our videos on a regular basis.